There is a particular kind of disappointment that gardeners who care about their yards know very well. It happens in March, sometimes in early April. The neighbors' yards begin to show the first signs of life, a flash of color here, a cluster of blooms there, and the garden that looks so full and so beautiful in summer suddenly reveals itself for what it is in early spring, empty, brown, waiting. The beds that were lush with perennials in July are bare soil. The shrubs that carried the summer garden are leafless sticks. And the gardener who spent all of last season tending and planting and caring for this yard is standing in it in early spring, looking at nothing and wondering where all that effort went. What most gardeners do not realize until they discover it is that the answer to this problem is solved entirely in the fall, not in spring when the emptiness is discovered and the instinct is to run to the garden center and buy something, anything, that has color in fall. Because certain plants do their most important work underground, in the cold, in the dark, while the garden sleeps and the gardener is inside, thinking about other things. These are bulbs, and the bulbs that are planted in fall are the reason that some gardens explode with color in March and April, while others are still brown and waiting. The work happens in the fall. The reward happens in spring, and the gardener who understands this never has an empty garden in the early season again. 9 bulbs are on this list. Every one of them is planted in fall, forgotten through winter, and produces a spring display that makes the yard look like the gardener planned everything perfectly. Because they did. Back in October, when the hard work took about an hour. Stay until the very end of this list, because the 9th bulb is one that most American gardeners have never tried, and it produces the most dramatic and most unexpected display of any spring-blooming bulb available. It is coming. Stay for it. Bulb 1. Tulip. The spring statement that rewrites the yard. There is no flower that announces spring more boldly than the tulip, and there is no spring display that stops people on the sidewalk more reliably than a mass planting of tulips in full bloom. The tulip does not ease into spring. It arrives. The colors are saturated in a way that few flowers in any season can match. Reds so pure they seem to glow, purples so deep they look like velvet, oranges and yellows so vivid they seem lit from within. And the form, that perfect upright cup on a strong stem, creates an orderly architectural display in the garden that looks planned and intentional in a way that most spring flowers do not. A bed of matching tulips in full bloom in April looks like a professional installation. The reality is that it was planted by one person with a bag of bulbs and a trowel on an afternoon in October. Smart gardeners know that the tulip is the single most powerful tool for transforming the early spring garden from nothing to spectacular in the shortest possible time. And they use it accordingly, not as a sparse accent here and there, but in the generous quantities that produce the mass display that actually changes the way the yard looks from the street. A single tulip bulb produces a single flower. 50 tulip bulbs planted together in a 3-foot circle produce a display that reads from a car window. 100 bulbs in a bed produce something that makes people stop walking and take photographs. The price per bulb, typically under $1 for quality Dutch tulip bulbs purchased in fall, makes this generosity entirely affordable. The investment that most gardeners make on a single flat of spring annuals in May would plant several hundred tulip bulbs in October and produce a display that arrives 6 weeks earlier and looks twice as impressive. The variety selection available in tulips is so extensive that entire gardens can be designed around bloom times within the tulip season alone, early, mid, and late varieties that extend the tulip display from March into May in most American climates. Single early tulips like Apricot Beauty and Christmas Dream open when the garden most needs them. Darwin hybrids like Appledorn and Golden Appledorn produce the largest flowers at peak spring bloom time. Late-blooming parrot tulips and fringed varieties carry the tulip season into the weeks when other spring flowers are just beginning. A garden planted with a deliberate mix of early, mid, and late tulip varieties does not have a single spring tulip moment It has 2 months of successive tulip displays that keep the garden looking spectacular through the entire early season. Bulb 2. Daffodil, the bulb that takes care of itself forever. The daffodil is the spring bulb that requires the least from the gardener and delivers the most in return. And the combination of those two qualities makes it the foundation bulb that every American garden should be built on. Tulips require lifting in many climates or replacing when they decline. Hyacinths perform spectacularly for a few seasons and then diminish. Daffodils naturalize. They spread, they multiply. They return year after year with increasing abundance without being divided, replanted, or given any attention whatsoever. The daffodil bed that was planted with 50 bulbs in the first fall can become a bed of several hundred blooming clumps within a decade, without a single additional bulb purchase or any intervention beyond. Enjoying the display, the secret that makes daffodils so permanent in the landscape where most other spring bulbs are not, is the same secret that makes them so cheerfully indifferent to the deer, voles, squirrels, and other wildlife that destroy tulip plantings overnight. Daffodil bulbs contain licorine and other alkaloid compounds that make them toxic and deeply unpalatable to virtually every mammal that would otherwise consider them food. While squirrels are excavating tulip bulbs and deer are browsing through the garden in early spring, the daffodils go completely untouched. They bloom, they set seed, they multiply underground through offsets, and they come back the following spring with more flowers than the year before, because nothing bothers them and nothing stops them from doing exactly what they are designed to do. The color range available in daffodils extends far beyond the yellow trumpets that most gardeners picture when they hear the name. White and yellow bicolors like ice follies create a cool, sophisticated spring palette. Peachy pink cups like pink charm and salome bring warm colors to the early season that most gardeners do not expect from daffodils. Split corona varieties that look nothing like the classic trumpet form, their petals flattened and split around the cup, create a ruffled, almost orchid-like effect that surprises everyone who sees them. A garden planted with a deliberate assortment of daffodil varieties blooms in the full color range of spring, from the pure whites of early March through the complex pinks and oranges of late April, without any replanting and with increasing abundance every year. Bulb 3. Crocus, the first color of the year. Crocus earns its position on this list not because it is the most spectacular spring bulb, it is not, but because of when it blooms. February in most American gardens, sometimes late January in warmer climates. The moment when winter still feels most relentless, when spring seems furthest away, when the entire landscape is gray and brown and bare. That is when the crocus opens. The small cup-shaped flowers in purple, white, yellow, and striped combinations push through frozen ground, sometimes through actual snow, and announce that something is happening underground, that the season is changing, that the garden that looked dead is not dead at all. The psychological effect of seeing those first colors in February is entirely disproportionate to the modest size of the flower. After weeks of nothing, even a small crocus feels like a celebration. What makes crocus so valuable as a naturalizing bulb is the same quality that makes daffodils permanent in the landscape. It multiplies. Each crocus corm produces offsets that develop into new flowering corms over successive seasons, expanding the planting without any intervention from the gardener. 100 crocus corms planted in a lawn or a garden bed in fall become several hundred over the following 5 years, and eventually thousands, creating drifts of early color that weave through the garden in the same way that wildflowers colonize a meadow. Informally, naturally, with the kind of abundance that looks designed but is entirely self-generated. The crocus that was planted once becomes a permanent feature of the garden that grows more beautiful every year. The technique of planting crocus in lawn areas, tucking the small corms into the turf where they will push up through the grass in February and March, creates one of the most beautiful and most effortless spring displays. Available in American horticulture, the lawn that appears from a distance to be simply starting to green up in early spring is, on closer inspection, studded with hundreds of purple and white and yellow crocus flowers, growing naturally among the grass blades. The first mowing of spring, held until the crocus foliage has had time to photosynthesize and replenish the corm for the following year, is a small delay with a spectacular annual reward. Bulb 4. Hyacinth, the fragrance that fills the whole yard. The hyacinth is the only spring bulb on this list that earns its place as much through scent as through visual impact, and the scent it produces in April is one of the most intensely beautiful fragrances available in any garden in any season. A single hyacinth in full bloom releases enough fragrance to perfume the air within several feet of the plant. A dozen hyacinths planted together create a scent experience that fills the entire garden and drifts into the house through open windows. The fragrance is sweet without being cloying, rich without being heavy, and so distinctively spring-like that it produces an almost involuntary emotional response in most people, a sense of warmth and optimism and renewal that is difficult to attribute to anything other than the specific chemistry of this flower on a warm April morning. The visual impact of hyacinth is as distinctive as its fragrance. The dense, cylindrical flower spikes, packed so tightly with individual florets that the spike appears almost solid, create a formal, architectural presence in the spring garden that no other bulb quite replicates. In colors ranging from the deepest navy blue through cobalt, purple, pink, white, salmon, and yellow, hyacinths provide the early season garden with saturated color that reads beautifully both up close and from a distance. A row of matching hyacinths along a garden path creates a formal designed effect that looks expensive and intentional. A mixed assortment planted in a container for the porch or the front steps creates a fragrant spring welcome that greets every visitor before they reach the door. Smart gardeners know that hyacinth performance is most spectacular in the first year after planting, when the bulb has stored the maximum energy for its debut bloom, and that the display becomes slightly looser and less formal in successive years, as the bulb's energy is divided between flowering and producing offsets. Rather than treating this as a decline, experienced gardeners use it, planting fresh hyacinth bulbs in a rotating cycle that ensures at least some portion of the hyacinth display is always in its most spectacular first-year form, while the naturalized older bulbs fill in around them with the softer, more informal bloom that comes with age. Right here at this point in the list, it is worth stopping to say something to the gardeners watching this video who have been looking at their empty March garden year after year and wondering what to do about it. The answer is not what the garden center sells in spring, the pansies and primroses and early annuals that provide temporary color and then require replacing. The answer is what is in the bulb section in October. An afternoon in fall, a bag of bulbs, a trowel, and the knowledge of what goes where. That is all it takes to transform the empty spring garden into something that makes the rest of the street look like it is still waiting for the season to start. Drop a U.S. state or hardiness zone in the comments right now, because gardeners in the same region watching this video are making the same October planting decisions and the same zone-specific variety choices. Bulb 5. Allium, the purple globe, that bridges spring and summer. Allium occupies a unique position in the bulb world because it blooms at exactly the moment when most spring bulbs have finished and most summer perennials have not yet begun. The awkward transition weeks of late May and early June, when the garden can feel like it is in a lull between seasons. Into that gap comes allium, and the perfectly spherical purple flower heads it produces on tall, bare stems are so architecturally distinctive and so visually unexpected at that time of year that they seem to announce a new season rather than fill a gap between two others. A garden with allium in bloom in late May looks like a garden that has thought carefully about the whole season rather than just the obvious moments. The globe-shaped flower heads of Allium giganteum and its relatives, some reaching the size of a Softball on stems that can rise 3 to 4 feet tall create a vertical, floating presence in the garden that no other plant replicates. From a distance, a mass planting of allium in bloom looks like someone placed purple spheres in the garden and suspended them in midair above the foliage below. Up close, the individual tiny flowers that compose each globe are visible, a level of intricate detail that rewards a closer look in a way that bolder, simpler flowers never do. The combination of impressive architecture from a distance and exquisite detail up close is what makes allium so reliably the most commented on plant in any garden that grows it. After the fresh purple flowers fade, the seed heads that remain are as ornamentally valuable as the flowers themselves. The parchment-colored dried globes hold their architectural form through summer and into fall, providing structural interest at a time when the plants around them are coming and going. Smart gardeners leave allium seed heads standing through the entire summer rather than cutting them back. The dried globes catch the light in a way that makes them look like botanical sculpture, and they extend the ornamental contribution of the allium from its brief bloom period through months of additional visual interest. Bulb 6. Scilla, the blue carpet. That covers itself Scilla siberica, Siberian squill, is the spring bulb that gardeners discover and then immediately wonder why it took so long to find. The small, nodding, intensely blue flowers that appear in March are among the most vivid blues available in the entire plant world. A saturated electric blue that is almost impossible to look away from. But it is not the individual flower that makes Scilla so extraordinary. It is the quantity. Each small bulb produces multiple stems, each stem carries multiple flowers, and when Scilla is allowed to naturalize, as it does so willingly and so rapidly, the individual flowers become a carpet, a sweep, a river of blue that flows under trees and through garden beds and across lawn areas with a kind of naturalistic abundance that looks wild and designed simultaneously. Scilla naturalizes faster than almost any other spring bulb, spreading both by seed and by the offsets that each bulb produces, colonizing bare soil and lawn areas and shaded spots under trees with a speed that makes it feel like the garden is growing itself. 100 Scilla bulbs planted in fall beneath a deciduous tree become several hundred within 2 seasons and, eventually, thousands. A blue carpet that appears every March like a miracle, covers the ground for 2 to 3 weeks, and then disappears entirely as the leaves emerge above it, and the gardener has nothing to do but wait for the following March when it all happens again. From Zone 2 through Zone 8, Scilla blooms reliably and spreads freely, asking nothing in return for one of the most beautiful early spring displays available in the American garden. Bulb 7. Muscari. The blue grape that fills. Every gap muscari, grape hyacinth, is the bulb that experienced gardeners use to solve the problem of empty space in the spring garden because it naturalizes so prolifically, grows in such a wide range of conditions, and produces such reliable color from year 2 onward that it effectively fills any bare ground it is given with a blue-purple carpet that requires no maintenance and no replanting. The small grape-like clusters of blue-purple flowers that appear in April are modest compared to the large flowered Dutch bulbs, but what muscari lacks in individual drama, it more than compensates for in quantity and reliability, and in the way its blue-purple color interacts with the other colors of the spring garden, providing the cool counterpoint that makes yellow daffodils and red tulips look richer and more intentional by contrast. The naturalizing behavior of muscari is its most practically useful quality. Unlike tulips, which must often be replaced when they decline, muscari increases every year with complete indifference to soil conditions, light levels, and gardener attention. It grows in full sun and in the partial shade under deciduous trees. It grows in rich garden soil and in the lean, root-competitive soil at the base of hedges. It grows in formal beds and in lawn areas, popping up through the turf in early spring with small grassy foliage that is easy to overlook until the flowers appear. This tolerance for conditions that defeat other bulbs makes it the ideal filler for the difficult spaces, the spots under trees, along fence lines, at the edges of paths where other plants struggle. And bare soil generates weeds, the combination of muscari and daffodils planting the two together, so that the blue-purple of the muscari echoes and complements the yellow and white of the daffodils, is one of the classic spring garden color combinations used by gardeners for generations because it works so reliably and looks so effortlessly designed. The blue makes the yellow brighter, the yellow makes the blue deeper, and because both naturalize readily, the combination improves every year without any intervention, becoming more abundant and more beautiful with each passing spring. Bulb 8. Fritillaria, the checkered secret that stops. Everyone, Fritillaria meleagris, the snake's head fritillary, is the spring bulb that most American gardeners have never grown, and the ones who discover it consistently describe the experience of seeing it in bloom for the first time as one of the most surprising moments in their gardening life. The nodding pendant flowers are patterned in a checkerboard of dark purple and pale lavender, patterned so geometric and so precise that it looks less like something that grew in the ground than something that was designed and fabricated. The effect in the garden is of a flower that someone placed there as a conversation piece, a botanical curiosity, something to make visitors stop and look closely and ask what it is and where it came from. The checkered pattern of Fritillaria flowers is produced by cells of different pigmentation arranged in a precise geometric grid across the surface of each petal, a pattern that serves as a nectar guide for the high early-season pollinators that visit the flowers before most other spring blooms have opened. From a distance, the pendant flowers nodding on slender stems create a soft, informal quality in the garden that contrasts beautifully with the upright formality of tulips and the bold globes of alychum. Up close, the pattern is so intricate and so unexpected that most people reach out instinctively to touch it, as though verifying that it is real and not painted. It is real. It grew from a bulb that cost $1 or $2 and was planted in a hole 6 inches deep in October, and then completely forgotten until April. Fritillaria meleagris thrives in moist, slightly acidic soil conditions and performs best in the partial shade under deciduous trees or at the margins of pond and stream edges where consistent moisture is available. In these conditions that defeat most other spring bulbs, Fritillaria naturalizes reliably and increases year over year, creating drifts of those extraordinary checkered flowers in the shaded, moist spaces that most gardeners struggle to fill with anything interesting. From Zone 3 through Zone 8, this remarkable bulb asks only for moisture and a little shade in return for one of the most visually distinctive spring displays available in American horticulture. Bulb 9, the one most American. Gardeners have never tried. Camassia, the native blue that looks like it belongs. This is the bulb that was promised at the beginning of this video, and it earns its position at the end of this list for a reason that goes beyond its visual impact, though that impact is extraordinary. Camassia, Kama's lily, is a native North American bulb that evolved in the meadows and prairies of the American West, where it once bloomed in such quantities that early explorers described seeing entire valley floors covered in blue. That abundance is gone from the wild, but the plant itself is available as a garden bulb, and what it does in the garden in May and early June, the gap between spring bulbs and summer perennials, the weeks when the garden is in transition and most at risk of looking bare, is unlike anything that European garden bulbs can provide. The flower spikes of Camassia rise to 2 to 3 feet tall in May and June, carrying dozens of star-shaped flowers in shades of deep violet blue, lavender, and white along gracefully arching stems. The overall effect in the garden, those tall blue spikes appearing above the fading foliage of earlier spring bulbs and below the emerging new growth of summer perennials, is of a plant that fills exactly the right space at exactly the right time with exactly the right color. The blue that Camassia provides in late spring and early summer is a blue that no other bulb provides at that time of year, bridging the gap between the early season and the summer with a color that anchors and elevates every planting around it. What makes Camassia the nuclear option on this list is not just the beauty of its flowers, but the conditions in which it performs most spectacularly. Camassia evolved in seasonally wet meadows, areas that flood in winter and spring and dry out in summer. In the garden, this translates to performance in exactly the difficult conditions that defeat most spring bulbs: the low, wet areas of the yard that collect water after rain, the drainage problem zones beside downspouts and at the base of slopes, the chronically moist spots under deciduous trees where standing water persists through March and April. These are the locations where tulips rot, where daffodils struggle, where most ornamental plants simply decline. Camassia thrives in them. Plant it where the water goes, in the problem zones that have never supported anything beautiful before, and watch what it does in May. From Zone 3 through Zone 8, this overlooked native bulb transforms the garden's most difficult spaces into its most spectacular spring feature, with a display that comes back every year, asks for nothing, and gets better every season it is left in place. 9 bulbs. 9 reasons to spend an afternoon in October with a trowel and a bag of planting instructions, knowing that every hole dug in the fall is a promise that March and April will keep. The empty spring garden is not a problem to be solved in spring. It is a problem to be solved right now, in fall, with bulbs that will work through the winter in the dark and the cold, and deliver everything they were asked to deliver the moment the ground warms and the days lengthen. Plant them once, forget about them, and wake up to the garden that the rest of the neighborhood will be asking about. If this video helped, hit subscribe to join this gardening community and watch the next video on screen to keep building the spring garden that everyone on the street wishes they had planted last fall.